This is the candidate meet and greet forum. We'll have this meeting tonight, and then of course the next one will be Saturday at 10, and the formats will be the same. I'm Terry Bowie, the current POA board president, soon to be retired, I hope, again. I'll be acting as moderator of sorts for this evening. Each candidate is going to be is allotted 10 minutes at the microphone here. And by the way, we are videotaping both sessions, both this one and Saturday, and both of them will be on the website. Both sessions will be on the website. Each candidate is going to be allotted 10 minutes at the microphone here to be used as they see fit. They may or may not choose to answer questions. It's up to them. It's entirely their choice. I'm going to call up here in alphabetical order by their last name, and the first candidate is Linda Rios Brook. Linda?
Wow, I'm impressed that you all came to soup and salad night at the club. Dick Morgan told me to begin expressing diversity and by telling you that I am the girl up here. Okay, so I am the girl, okay? And I'd like to take the rest of my time to thank you for coming and to tell you that I have a lot of respect for everybody who's sitting up here tonight, and I look forward to what they have to say. So let me tell you what I have to say. I'm going to tell you what I have done in my life. I'm going to tell you what I have learned from that. And I'm going to tell you why I'm standing for this election. I spent most of my career, as did my husband Larry, in television. I began that at an early age. I was the president and general manager of the CBS television station in San Antonio, Texas. You might be interested to know that it was the #1 rated television station in the country at that time. And then I was transferred to Jacksonville, Florida, and I was the president and general manager of the ABC station and then the NBC station in Jacksonville. And then I was transferred to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I was the president and general manager of the NBC station there. When I ran these television stations, we were always #1 in news. We were always #1 in our television group in terms of profitability and always #1 in terms of return on investment. I started out doing that at the very lowest paid job in the station and ended up where I did. Then, in 1991, Larry and I and a few of our friends had an opportunity to buy a UHF television station in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so we did. It was a broken down station. We put together $2.5 million and we bought it. And 7 years later, we sold it to Sinclair for $52.5 net to the shareholders, which was a pretty good investment for 7 years, for just a small group of people. And while we did that, I had a talk show for 7 years. It was my television station, so I could do that. But those aren't the only jobs that I ever had. I've been a waitress. I've sold encyclopedias door to door. And when I was 8 years old and I lived in West Texas, I used to walk down to the Southern Maid Bakery on Saturday morning, and I bought 10 boxes of donuts for 50 cents each, and I had a little red wagon, and I pulled them through my neighborhood, and I sold them for $1 a piece.
All right. And you do that for POA.
So I do know something about just-in-time inventory and return on investment. So that's what I've done. Larry's been in television and cable also. Some people are more impressed to know that Larry used to work for Billy Graham. So he's not running IM, so that's all I'm going to tell you, about that part of it. When I managed the ABC station and the CBS station, one of the things that I don't usually put on my resume, but I was happiest about, is that both unions decertified under my management. And I like to think that the reason why is that they decided that they didn't need a union in order to be treated fairly with other employees. So here's what I've learned over the years. I had an opportunity some time back to interview Trammell Crow. And I asked him what made his companies as good as they were. And he said, well, basically, he said, you know, he was hands-off for most of his divisions, and he said, but I've got 3 rules, and he said, everybody who runs a division for me has to follow these 3 rules. And he said, the first one is hire nice people. Hire somebody that is civil, that is respectful in dealing with other people, and that can listen to other points of view. Life is too short to work with people who are rude or who don't respect what other people bring to the team. He said the second thing is hire the smartest person you can find. He said, I'm less interested in education and I'm less interested in experience, because if it's the right person, we can get them the education. And if they don't have enough experience, after they work here long enough, they'll have enough experience. But the brains that they come with is all they got. So hire the smartest person you can find. And he said the third thing is hire people who fit in. He said it doesn't matter what they've done or what their resume looks like if they can't get along with anybody, if they can't consider another point of view. And so I adopted that, to hire nice people, smart people, people who fit in. Here's the second thing that I learned. Reasonable people can disagree. And as long as they remain reasonable people, they can ultimately find a way to get to a conclusion that while maybe everybody doesn't like everything about the conclusion, but everybody can accept the conclusion and how they got there, because that's what reasonable people do. And then the third thing that I learned is that whether it is a person or it's a board or it's a committee, whatever it is, it's a good idea not to confuse autonomy with stupidity. Just because one has the authority to make a decision without consulting with anyone else does not mean that's a good idea. The more people that can be brought into the discussion and the decision-making process, the better it is. You know, every institution, no matter what it is, little company, big company, board, doesn't make any difference, comes to a point where you've got to make a decision that not everybody's going to like. You're going to come to a point where you don't have a choice between a good decision and a bad decision. You just got a choice between a bad decision and a worse decision. And in my life, I have learned that if you're going to have to take a risk, if you're going to have to do something that's going to cause consternation, if you're going to climb out on that limb, take as many people out on that limb with you as you can. Because there's a whole lot fewer that are going to be there to try to cut it down. The next thing that I learned is that while sometimes things are not what they appear to be, most of the time they are. Most of the time it's exactly what it looks like. And if you thought you were getting a dog, and instead you bought something that oinks and wallows in the mud, it's probably a pig. Oh, no, I cannot believe somebody said that. It's probably a pig, okay? And it doesn't make any difference how much lip gloss you put on that pig. It is still a pig, and it still oinks. And the best thing that you can do when you've ended up with a bad situation or with something that you don't like, the best thing you can do is help it retire to the farm and go buy the dog you thought you were getting to start with. Now let me tell you why I decided to stand for this election. And it's not because I didn't think that these are good candidates, because you won't make a bad decision no matter what it is you do. But here's why I decided. I love this place. Larry and I have been married for 38 years, and we have lived in a lot of really nice places. But I've never seen a place like Bentwater. I've never been in a community that's got the charisma and the personality that Bentwater has about it. This is the only place I've ever lived where people just show up on your doorstep. They just knock the door and come in. They don't call, and if they do call, they're probably already in the driveway. And it's a real incentive to get up and put your makeup on every day, because that's just what's going to happen. And I believe that we all want the same things. We want our housing value to stay high. We want the covenants that we've got obeyed. If they need to be changed, then let's get together and figure out how to change them. We expect them to pay reasonable fees, but we don't want to pay for things that we don't know what's going on. So here, if I get elected, here's what I promise you, is that I'll be just like you are. I'll listen to everything that you have to say. I won't make a decision about a situation until I understand the situation. I promise you that I'll work really hard, and I also promise you that if you don't elect me, that I'll support whoever you do. I'll support whoever you do. So, God bless America, and God bless Bentwater.
The second candidate is Michael Durham. This is not him. Mr. Durham sent me his regrets last night. He asked that I convey that this forum happens to coincide with a dinner engagement and concert to celebrate both his wife's birthday and their anniversary. He does intend to be at the forum on Saturday. He will be there on Saturday. So our next candidate is Terry Gent.
While I'm not Michael Durham, I did ask if he had a second ticket. Thank you for coming out tonight and listening to us talk about the Property Owners Association. And thank you, candidates, for committing your time and your expertise to further the agenda of the Property Owners Association. I've had the honor and privilege of serving with many boards in Bentwater, and the honor and privilege of being on the first board elected from and by the residents. I want to thank those board members who served, including Sarah Conway and Tom Watkins. It's been an honor and privilege to work for the Property Owners Association. I would be really remiss if I didn't thank the real heroes of the Bentwater Property Owners Association, and that's the staff. We have one of the greatest staffs, led by Robert Yetter, who embraced the transition year, who embraced the change, and did it with smiles and grace. I applaud you. Okay, so I've been told through many Bible passages that the man who has experience is not at the mercy of the man who has education. So I want to tell you a little bit about my experience as a volunteer providing service to this community. In late 2011, Carl Herring twisted my arm and told me to run for the Bentwater Civic Association board. I did, and was elected and served on that board for 4 years, 3 of which I served as president. I'm really proud of the BCA and what it's accomplished and what it still accomplishes. In November of 2014, having, as the BCA president, worked with the POA and the Board of Trustees, I was appointed to serve out the remainder of the term, which was 14 months, of Jeff Boyce, who moved to San Antonio and gave up his seat. It was an interesting experience. At the end of that term, in 2015, I stood and was elected for a full 3-year term on the POA Advisory Board, along with Sarah Conway, a couple of others. We prepared for the transition that was coming. We organized committees that had meaningful work to do, and we moved forward. That term, full term, turned out to be 18 months as we were successful in convincing all that were involved that the transition should occur. That transition was from a developer-controlled board. There were 3 members on that of trustees, 2 of which were appointed by the developer, and 1 which was elected from and by the members, and that was Terry Bowie. When the new board came into existence on July the 1st of 2017, it was a 5-person board. We had all gone through 5 sessions of education which tried to convince us that we really shouldn't run for the board. Tried to convince us that the job was going to be tough, and you know, it was and is. So what have I learned? I've learned that change is hard. Sometimes it's exciting and chaotic, and I liken it to taking a whitewater river rafting trip where you get into the boat with 8 people and a guide. You may or may not know them, and your guide says, okay, this is what we're going to do. When I say all paddle forward, you paddle forward. When I say all back, you paddle backwards. When I say starboard, paddle to the forward, and port, paddle backwards, you do that. And we all look at each other and say, what the heck is starboard and port? It also can be, change can be slow and methodical. It's kind of like a group of people go into the room and paint the room, and the next thing you hear, and we sit around and watch the paint dry, next thing you hear is somebody shouts out, wrong color, or wrong building. So, change is painful, and it has been somewhat painful. The raft hits a rock, or you lose an important member, like Sarah Conway, at a critical period of time. So we have to deal with the pain and the rapids and move on. I'm not a politician, I'm not a philosopher, and I'm certainly not a policy wonk. But I'm simply a resident who has volunteered my time with some planning skills and have served this community in a volunteer role to the best of my ability since 2011. So why would I want to be on this board again? Several people have asked me that. 14 months ago, I ran on a platform of embracing change, improving communications, and planning for the highest and best use of our POA assets. My work is not yet complete. As Vice President and Chair of the Planning Committee, I've guided and directed several projects. One is the second year of the 5-year street repair and maintenance program with Paul Guggenheim, who has been the key to the success as the technical expert. We have implemented an aggressive plan for repair and replacement of our streets to eliminate the need for major repairs in the future. We are on plan and actually ahead of, we're on budget and actually ahead of our schedule. If elected, I will continue to push this successful program. Something that nobody hardly knows, we've updated and documented a 10-year plan for maintenance and repair of the pigeonhole, the little square mailboxes in Bentwater. The first phase of which has been completed, and that was the replacement of the 80 mailboxes on Bentwater Drive at the 13th green on the Miller. After we replaced them, we moved them across the street to a safer location. Who cares, right? It was done. We've pushed forward on a plan to repair the common property bulkheads. Many people in Bentwater probably do not realize that we have like 1,400 square feet or linear feet of bulkheads that belong to the Property Owners Association. The first phase in Section 8 has been contracted for, and the repairs will be completed in the fall. Now, a year ago this week, you probably might remember, we had a little rainstorm. That resulted in the unplanned opportunity to work with a fellow board member, Warren Dean, to plan for the replacement of the property owner's office space. We've been through an extensive vetting of the project. We should start construction in September and be finished with the new building in February of 2019. I will continue to work to establish clear communications policy and the technology to implement that, making sure that we both receive the message and send the message. I will continue to evaluate outside contract services, many of whom are interested in looking at legal counsel, landscaping services to our neighborhoods, and the constable contracts. I will, without question, work to fulfill the Property Owners Association vision, mission, and value statement, and the board objectives therein. Incidentally, I helped craft those early on in the board responsibility. In 2017, change was needed, and over the last 14 months, many changes have occurred, not all visible to the members, but all needed. It's been an interesting and challenging year. Changes will continue to occur, but what I ask all of you is no matter who gets elected to this board's positions, please support them to the fullest, because they are volunteers and they are residents of Bentwater and they are your neighbors. Thank you and for coming, and I ask for your vote.
The fourth candidate is Dwane Swonke. Dwane?
Well, one thing I can tell you is I won't be the most eloquent speaker up here tonight, and I'm probably not the most formally educated speaker up here. But I will pledge my loyalty to Bentwater and doing everything I can to help this community maintain its property values and be the beacon on the hill that it's intended to be. With my 35 years of construction experience, I feel like that I can really help the community. I think we're at a turning point where there's a lot of maintenance needs to be done, roads need to be kept. There's other things that in the community that need to be, taken care of or overseen. There's issues with the developer's assets that need to be addressed with the developer. See if he'll do something with them, improve them. We pay a monthly fee every month, and I think we're entitled to the best amenities that he can give us. Whether that works or not, I don't know, but I certainly pledge to try to do something with that. I'm not a career POA board member or HOA board member. I've never served on one. I have served in business, had my own business. Good or bad, I had my own business. I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot through my entire career in construction that I want to lend to the community. What I'd like to do is if anyone has any questions, anything they'd like to ask of me, I'd like to address that.
How do you intend to influence the private corporation that owns the amenities that you stated? When that's a private corporation and this is a POA, they're completely separate. Are you going to use your position and possibly alienate the other country club?
No, I'm not looking to alienate them. What I'm looking to do is bring them to the table and say, look, we have common interests, You know, they have assets, they're worth something. Our property values, you know, need to be maintained. And if, you know, you're looking to sell your house and move, and they look at the country club now, or this place here that needs to be painted, the outside needs to be cleaned up. It's not that great. It can be a lot better with a little bit of effort. That's what I'm looking to do, is just bring them to the table, have that discussion. Not demand anything of them, but let them know we have a common interest. I hope that answered your question, but you don't get anything out of anybody trying to beat them down.
We've been trying to do that for about, I don't know, 20 years.
Well, you know, hopefully I can be successful at it, given the opportunity. I certainly would like to do that. Any other questions? Okay. One thing that I have been able to do recently is, I went to the initial meeting with the POA when we took over as running it, the member-elected board. I was one of 2 residents there. I let the board know then at that time that I was there to support them, do what I could do to help them, lend my knowledge that I had gained over the years to help them with anything in the community. Just call on me. Well, the opportunity arose. I was pretty public about the building, the costs, and things like that. So I've been on the building committee, and we worked along with Terry. It's been a great process. We turned it upside down, done just about everything we can with it to get it to a point to where it actually goes out, and we get the most for our dollar. And that was my goal in that. You know, there's others that would agree maybe we don't need the building, something. I think the building is probably going to get built because the board has enough on it that that's what they're going to do at this time with the 3 that were remaining. So. What I said is that the building is going to get built because with only 2 spots up, the 3 that are remaining are not going to allow it to be not built. Okay? Okay?
Is there any voice from the residents that what the residents feel that building should be going to be entertained? Because the first meeting that I came to, which I have not been involved before that happened, I thought we were voting that night. I didn't realize we were voting on how we were going to take it. I thought we were voting on that, whether we were going to do it. Which obviously, I guess, is the most attended meeting that this board has ever had. So obviously, there's an issue with people thinking what we should do for that building. So are y'all saying that?
Well, I can't answer for the board. I'm not on the board. But what I will tell you is I was the one that asked that question at that meeting, are we going to vote on building this building? And I was told emphatically, we were elected, we're going to make that decision. That's been backed up. We've reevaluated the building. We've had a building committee. That process has gone through. So I can't answer to what the board's going to do. I'm not on the board at this time. So that's where that is.
Well, I can tell you as a realtor, first thing people ask when you're showing a house is price, square foot, year built, and how much is it due.
Right.
That's those, and I highlight them on every line of people. If I had a house for showing it, which I don't, I have no house, have no plan on selling it, I would be writing more than, I think we need to think about that. I think that building is outrageous. Nobody spends that kind of money on POA.
Come on.
Yeah. So I have a question. If you're elected, and I guess actually my question is to everyone, will you be more engaged in terms of sending out surveys and getting more feedback from the members? Because when the board members are elected to represent the members and to make decisions, it's decisions on their behalf. And of course, I own property and many other developments, and all of them will send out surveys and try to implement what comes back from the surveys.
Right.
And I'm wondering if the candidates are going to try to help implement that a little bit more, a little more input, that sort of thing.
Well, I believe in transparency, and I also believe in hearing what the people have to say. If I'm elected, I would certainly implement that on my part, if not the full board. I want to know what y'all have to say. I want to know the pulse of the community. Had I been on this board from the get-go when the building was, I would have asked that it be voted on. I think that's the right thing to do. Not that it would change anything or not, but I think that it should be voted on.
Yeah, because it would have been put to that. And if everybody voted to go forward, fine.
Right. Yeah. I don't know the outcome of that, but I think it would have been the right thing to do from a standpoint for the community, so that everybody had a chance to acknowledge it.
Do you feel like the committee of which you were a part, and Michael and others,
was not on the building.
oh, I apologize.
Michael Durham was on the bill.
Do you, Michael, Michael's the wrong person. Anyway, do you feel like that was a fair committee and heard the comments of the members of the committee?
Do I think it was fair in what we did?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so, very much.
And you think that the current plan that you proposed is a fair proposal?
I think what we have come up with is every leaf's been turned over. We've done everything we can possibly do with it to figure out what was over, where the overcost was, or where we were lacking in something in the building, and have corrected that. I think you're going to get the most for your dollar out of what we've come up with.
Now, do you have any notion of if this plan were implemented, how much per household, per lot, whatever it is, it would cost the members of Bentwater?
No, I don't have that number.
Does anyone have that number?
I don't think that was something that was going to be discussed tonight.
My understanding is the numbers haven't finalized yet. But
Okay.
Yeah. They're not finalized.
All right, fine.
Okay.
Is it, in your mind, less than the additional $7,000 a month we've been paying your friend Beelan,
You're not my friend.
his offices?
So I think it's
I'm sorry,
less.
it wasn't your friend.
I think it's less. What do you mean less? Okay. Time's up. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
The fifth candidate is Michael Tinberg. Michael?
Folks, I want to pass out, if I could, just a little piece to kind of follow along with me on. This is just very quick. This is posted online. Some people can kind of see, this is a summary of some of the, instead of 10 points, like that's from that, 10 points of some of the things that are important to me and what I will look to do and try to accomplish as a trustee. You know, I'd initially come up here. First of all, my background and qualifications are stated online, so I'm not going to waste my time going through that. Y'all can read that. A lot of you know me. There's a lot of things I think I bring to this table. Most specifically, folks, I write checks every week. Every single week, okay? I've built them, I've sold them, I run them every single day, okay? Somebody said to me once, what do you know about building a building? Guess what, folks? When you own your own company, you deal with the challenges, and you walk in and somebody says, we got a problem, you figure out a way to deal with it. That's what you do. And that's one thing I do bring to this table. I'd originally started out, I wanted to talk about our culture. Before I get started, there's a quote, there's a great song, and the lyrics kind of start out, and I saw the surprise and the fear in his eyes as I lifted his glass of champagne. Who knows the song? Garth Brooks, Friends in Low Places. Nothing to fear about what I'm going to say tonight, folks, okay? Nothing to fear at all. Maybe some wild anticipation, but nothing to fear. You know, 4 months ago, I made it very clear in this room to several hundred residents and since that I was not going to run for this board. In the past 4 months, I made a decision to run, and I actually made a decision to run at about 4:30 in the afternoon on August the 10th, 2 weeks ago. The reason why I did that, and what this discussion was going to be about, but it's not going to be about that anymore, is Our culture. Folks, I'm a firm believer that we need a change in our culture and our POA. A viable culture in our POA is critical to the sustainability of our POA as an institution, at the board level, and in our community, okay? And what is a culture? Let's just talk about that briefly before we get to those 10 points. A culture by definition, folks, is an integrated pattern of behavior and a set of shared attitudes and practices that characterizes an organization and that is passed on to future generations. Attitudes, pattern of behavior that's passed on in the organization. There's things we need to change. And I think there's things we need to talk about there, and I'd like to do it in the context, if I may, of these 10 points. One of the first things I would like to do as a trustee for this board, for this community, is to establish our POA as not just an administrative function, but as an advocacy function. Say that real fast. We've got to be completely committed to the best interest of the residents. All politics aside, all personal interests aside. Okay? Now, many of you might say, what about social media? What about all these things? What about all these other interests that are going on? We're going to talk about that in a minute. But we need to embrace social media, and we need to put our interest out there and talk about it. We'll do that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But just as important, we do need to establish our POA, folks, kind of to the question that I believe Dwayne brought up, and Ted asked a question about it, and other people have questioned. We do need to establish our POA as a strong, independent resident service group with independent legal representation, folks. I'm a strong believer in that. We've discussed it with our board at length. The current decision for the board is that we don't have a conflict of interest there. I firmly believe that we do. I'm absolutely convinced our community believes that we do, and we simply must make a change there. And when we get to Q&A, I can give people a very real example of why we need to do that. We have got to stay true to the conservative principles of nonprofit management, folks. We are a nonprofit organization. Humble, 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 okay? We don't need fancy this and fancy that at our POA level. We are a service organization, and we need to recognize that. We don't have an unlimited use of funds. We as a resident group, we are price elastic, okay? We will eventually respond to an increase our fees. We will eventually say, whoa, that's enough. Why do we have to do that, folks? Because we are, as some of you may have noticed, and this is an approximate comparison, our fees, apple to apples, with our nearest competitive neighbor down the street, Woodlands Hills, okay? It's a Woodlands Corp, Howard Hughes Development. Apples to apples, the base fee to live in Bentwater is 330% higher than it is in Woodlands Hills. To the lady's comment in the back, people looking to buy here will pay attention to that. And we are 330% higher. The building has been a big piece of that, or big piece of that discussion, but I'll be very candid with you. The building in and of itself really won't make a huge dent in that, but the building with other things will start to make a dent. And that's what we need to pay attention to. Folks, we have got to ensure our declaratory documents are member-friendly. In my opinion, they are not right now. They are unilateral in favor of a board that has unilateral decision to act unilaterally on essentially everything related to our community. I understand the need for that, particularly when it's a developer-controlled board. But now that it's resident-controlled, folks, we need to have checks and balances that protect us as well. Okay, that's very important. 3 months ago, at the board meeting in May, we made a pretty strong demand of a couple hundred people, not voters. It was a couple hundred people in that room, that those bylaws need to be rewritten. To my knowledge, they've not been looked at and rewritten yet, but I believe they need to be, and it's going to be a very high priority for me as a trustee. Next, I believe we need to align our community's financial position and make it consistent with established industry standards, okay? Now, this kind of ties into the concept of self-management versus outsourcing. Everybody knows I'm a strong proponent of outsourcing, okay? And just because I disagree with our board on this does not mean I need to get my head examined. Just because you disagree with our board on something doesn't mean you need to get your head examined. And that's what we were told at our May board meeting. There's no room in our community for those kind of words, folks. No room for it at all. I do not support it, and I publicly disavow those kind of statements, and I hope our board does as well, because there's no room for it, okay? But I do believe that there are benchmarks and there are standards that we are not hitting today. I think we can do better there. And one place we must do better, folks, is in our financial statements, okay? Our financial statements right now are not prepared and distributed on a timely basis, in a timely manner. And anybody who's run a business, anybody who's been in business knows when financial statements are not prepared and distributed timely, it casts a shadow over the integrity of those statements. That's not a charge, it's not an accusation, it is a fact. If we are late and consistently, persistently late, we must fix that and figure out why that is the case. We were late on our audit for last year. It's a violation of our bylaws. We are going to be late again with our audit this year. We were just told that this past 5 days by our trustee. It's in violation of our bylaws. We have to figure out why. We have to understand where the accountability for that lies. Does the accountability lie inside the POA staff somewhere? Do we have issues at the trustee level, or do we have problems with our systems and procedures? I don't know. I'm not privy to those details yet. But that's one thing we must pay attention to, because those financial statements, folks, aren't just numbers on a page. They tell a story. They tell us what's happening inside of our organization every day. And it's an organization, folks, that you all own. We own it. We should have a say in it, and we should understand what those financial results are in a timely manner, okay? I believe, based on input I've received from residents, we need to revisit our ACC guidelines, not in terms of strictness or what we can and can't build, but we need to have some accountability in these projects that are going around our community. We have individuals who've been fighting issues with builders for weeks and weeks and months. Our architectural control guidelines, best I can determine from reading them, is that we don't have a lot of authority with some of these builders to hold them accountable. We have to figure out a way to do that. And we need to revisit that, and that's very important for me to do that. Guys, this is critical for me. This is critical for me, and I hope you understand. We simply must engage resident input at the board level and our trustee level. I'll be the first one to tell you, it is unfortunate that we needed to turn to a petition for removal of our board members. These are good people. But the reason why the community turned to that is because, frankly, we weren't being listened to. We knew there were options, and there still are more options, in my opinion. But I've commended the board for listening. We've commended the board for forming the committee, and the board has acknowledged the committee has done good work. Folks, we have an active community. To be told, as we were in February, that we don't have the volunteer base in this community, I don't buy it. We've proven that wrong. We have other projects and other things in our community that we need to engage the resident base on, because look around the room. We've got every flavor of experience and expertise and years of experience that you can imagine on the earth. We simply must engage our resident base. And please don't tell us we don't have the time or the effort. We've proven that we do. And I can speak for the people who have been offering their services, like I have, and others who have been denied. Please listen to us. We have good things to say. We have good ideas. And when we are denied that, I ask the question, why? Why would we not want to listen to our residents? Why would we not open up a topic to residents to give their input? Very quickly, we've got to embrace changes in our demographics. Folks, our community is changing. Like it or not, it's changing dramatically, in a good way, in my opinion. But it's going to make a big difference in the future. We've got to leverage our POA-owned facilities. We have land. There's things we can do with them. I want to actively engage social media. Folks, 5 years ago, I was dragged kicking and screaming by my businesses into social media. Kicking and screaming. It is now the lifeblood of our business, and it's going to be the lifeblood of our future because of our change in demographics. To show disdain for social media is not the right thing. We must figure out a way to work with it, embrace it. Last but not least, I want to establish sustainability of our board, folks. These board members have put in countless hours. I respect that and I admire that. We must try to return our board to an advisory basis, not a working basis, because in the future it's going to be hard to find people who have been willing to make the commitments that these gentlemen have over the last 18 months. In some cases as high as 3 weeks a month, I'm told. 2 weeks, I was told by Jim, told by other members 3. So a lot of changes we can make to do better. We've done great. With your vote, I'll make those changes. And if you have any questions, I'll be around this room after the meeting. Ted, yes.
You mentioned, what was it, Forest Lawn or Forest Hill?
I'm sorry?
Forest
Woodlands Hills, Woodlands Hills, yes.
Okay, is that a man-giving community?
Pardon?
Is that a man-giving community?
No, it's not. It's a good question. When you,
So, did you take the cost of the man-giving community out of your $335?
I absolutely did. I made an adjustment. Now, it was an approximate adjustment. What's that?
I don't deal with the property. What is there?
Fee? Yeah.
What is there?
Yeah, let me address that. The annual dues at our nearest competitor, who I think we need to pay attention to because their average price of their home right now is about the average price of our appraised value of a house in Bentwater. There's some similarities. Their annual fee is $995. That fee includes, to my understanding, because I've visited, I've talked to them, I've spent probably 8 hours with the Howard Hughes Corporation on this issue, okay, and other issues. The $995, folks, this is our competition now. The $995 includes 17 miles of bike and hiking trails, okay? There's going to be 33 miles of streets in that neighborhood. They have 3 swimming pools, 107 acres of parks and open land, a 6,000 square foot community center, swimming pools, climbing rock, splash pad, see what I'm forgetting, a community center with a resident pool. $995 to do an accurate apples to apples. We have to add in our social fee. We have to add in our social fee and back out the gate because it's public.
They don't have the streets. They don't own the streets.
They do not own the streets. That's correct. And on the tax rate, folks, and I noted this online, the tax rate is high. The tax rate is high. And what's that? Excuse me a second. Excuse me a second. May I answer these questions?
Why don't you do that after?
Happy to do it. I'm happy to answer these questions, and the specifics I've got, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Okay, that's it. That's all the candidates. I appreciate your cooperation. That does conclude what we wanted to do tonight. Let me just remind you of some dates. Of course, we're here tonight, August 22nd. On the 24th, we'll be mailing out postcards to the property owners that we don't have email addresses for. I think there's now only 200. I can't believe this, but there's only 226 people that we don't have the email address for, and they'll get a postcard. The town hall, again, is on August the 25th. It'll be a duplication right here in this room of what we're doing tonight. The 27th, e-blast going out announcing that the online voting it opens on August the 28th. And on August 28th at midnight, 12:01, the voting opens. On September the 5th, notification that the voting stations are available at the POA office, right? Okay. For those who need help or need to use it. September the 27th, all voting closes down at noon on September the 27th, and the annual meeting starts at 6, and we will announce the winners at that time.
Do you vote at the POA website?
You will receive an email from the administrator. Vote HOA now.